A 2,000-year-old device is considered the world's first computer. We are still trying to figure out exactly how it worked. This is the mechanism, and it is just one example of a secret that vanished from history. This video explores 15 lost inventions that we are still trying to recreate. By the end, you will see history not as a simple timeline, but as a puzzle filled with brilliant, missing pieces. We will encounter a fire that burned on water and a cup that changes color with the light. How did ancient artisans achieve what our modern tools struggle to replicate? The answers challenge everything we assume about progress. What forgotten invention do you believe could change our world? Today, the story of the mechanism reveals a mind focused on understanding the cosmos. But history also holds secrets born from a much more urgent human need, the need to survive. In the darkness of the 7th century, as the Byzantine Empire faced a naval siege that threatened its very existence, a desperate innovation emerged from the workshops of Constantinople. It was a weapon so terrifying, so effective, with unstoppable power, Greek fire. Imagine the sheer psychological impact on an opposing sailor. You are trained for combat at sea, you know the risks of fire, but you also know that water is your salvation. Then you witness a stream of liquid fire arcing through the night air from a Byzantine warship. It strikes the water, and instead of being extinguished, it spreads. It clings to the wooden hull of your own ship. It burns with a fierce, roaring intensity, and no amount of seawater you throw upon it can put it out. Your only option is to abandon ship or be consumed. This was not merely a weapon, it was a form of ancient psychological warfare, a technological advantage so profound it helped preserve an empire for centuries. The secret of its creation was guarded with a level of security that would impress any modern state. According to historical accounts, the knowledge of its precise formula and the operation of the pressurized siphons used to project it was restricted to a single family within the empire. Emperors themselves were reportedly kept in the dark about the full details. This deliberate secrecy was its ultimate defense, and tragically for history, the reason it vanished. When Constantinople finally fell in the 15th century, that closely held family secret died with the last of its keepers. So what was in this miraculous, terrifying substance? Researchers analyzing fragmentary texts believe it was a petroleum-based mixture, likely similar to crude naphtha, combined with other ingredients that acted as a thickener. Some speculate that quicklime may have been included, a substance that reacts violently with water to generate heat, which could explain why attempts to douse the flames with seawater only made them burn fiercer. In many ways, it functioned like ancient napalm, a sticky, persistent incendiary. Modern chemists and historians have tried for decades to recreate it. They can, of course, make highly flammable liquids that burn on water. But none have perfectly matched the detailed descriptions from Byzantine chronicles, which speak of a substance that could be projected in a continuous liquid stream that adhered to any surface it touched. And that was virtually impossible to extinguish. The precise recipe, the ratios, the preparation method, these are the missing pieces. We have the general idea, but the masterpiece is lost. Greek fire stands as a stark reminder that technological peaks are not always permanent. A discovery that shaped the fate of empires, a chemical marvel that the basic element meant to counter it, faded into obscurity because its knowledge was held too close. It represents a pinnacle of ancient applied science whose complete truth remains just out of reach, a ghost of flame on water that we can describe but cannot truly command. That same mastery of materials that created a weapon of fire also forged a weapon of ice-cold precision. A crusading knight, facing an opponent wielding a curved blade of breathtaking beauty, would have seen more than just a sword. In the right light, its surface seemed to ripple like water or flow, with the intricate patterns of wood grain. This was Damascus steel, a material whose name became legendary not for its appearance alone, but for a performance that bordered on the supernatural. These blades were said to be so flexible they could bend 90 degrees and spring back true, so sharp they could slice a silk scarf floating in the air, and so resilient they could cleave through lesser weapons without a notch. For centuries, from its origins in India to its perfection in Middle Eastern forges up until the 18th century, this steel represented the absolute pinnacle of metallurgy. Its creation began not with common ore, but with small ingots of Wootz steel, which themselves were a marvel of ancient crucible technology. The true magic, however, happened in the forge. Artisans would heat, hammer, and fold the metal in a precise, secretive process, somehow coaxing out the steel's internal crystalline structure to form those mesmerizing patterns. Modern scientists, using electron microscopes to examine surviving blades, have discovered something astonishing. Within that steel are structures we consider modern nanotechnology, carbon nanotubes and nanowires, aligned within bands of cementite. These microscopic formations, likely encouraged by trace impurities like vanadium in the original ore, are what gave Damascus steel its legendary combination of hardness and flexibility. It was a perfect, if unknowing, marriage of material science and art, and then it was gone. By the 19th century, the art of forging true Damascus steel had vanished. The most likely explanation is a tragic convergence of lost knowledge. The specific mines that produced the ore with those crucial trace elements may have been depleted. The trade routes that supplied the Wootz ingots could have been disrupted, and with them, the intimate, hands-on craft passed from master to apprentice faded away without a complete written record. Today, we understand the what, but not the entire how. Contemporary metallurgists can create beautiful pattern-welded steel that mimics the watery look, often called Damascene steel. They can even use advanced processes to introduce alloys and control cooling to approach its properties. But no one has perfectly replicated the exact alchemy of the original process that yielded that specific, superior nanostructure. The authentic blade, a testament to an artisan's deep, intuitive dialogue with fire and metal, remains a ghost in the laboratory. We can analyze its spectral image under a microscope, but we cannot quite summon its spirit back into the forge. While the forges of Damascus fell silent, another ancient material has been whispering its secrets from beneath the sea for 2,000 years. Off the coast of modern-day Israel, the submerged ruins of the Roman harbor at Caesarea tell a story not of loss, but of incredible endurance. Massive concrete breakwaters, poured in the 1st century before the Common Era, still stand firm against the relentless pounding of the Mediterranean. They have outlasted empires, witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, and faced storms that would reduce modern concrete structures to crumbling rubble in mere decades. This is not a story of a forgotten weapon, but of a forgotten foundation, one that modern science is desperately trying to understand. What did the Romans know that we seem to have forgotten? Their concrete was a humble yet brilliant recipe. Instead of the Portland cement we use today, Roman engineers mixed lime with volcanic ash, known as pozzolana, and a surprising, counterintuitive ingredient, seawater. While we pour concrete and hope it never gets wet, the Romans actively used the sea itself as a key component. The magic happened slowly, over centuries. As seawater seeped into the concrete, it reacted with the volcanic ash in a long-term chemical conversation. This process gradually formed a rare, crystalline mineral called aluminous. Think of it not as a flaw or a sign of decay, but as the concrete growing its own reinforcement. These tiny, interlocking crystals actually strengthen the material from within, filling microscopic cracks as they form. It is a self-healing, living material that gets tougher with age, the complete opposite of our modern concrete, which inevitably weakens and cracks. For years, researchers believed this was simply a lucky accident of ancient chemistry, but recent, painstaking analysis suggests it was intentional. The precise ratio of ash to lime, the specific volcanic material used, and the vigorous mixing technique with all seem designed to encourage this remarkable transformation. The Romans may not have understood the molecular science, but through observation and experimentation, they perfected a formula that built for eternity. Today, laboratories around the world are trying to reverse engineer this ancient wisdom. The goal is not merely to copy a 2,000-year-old recipe, but to learn its principles. Imagine a world where our bridges and foundations could heal their own hairline fractures. Picture concrete that becomes more resilient in the harsh marine environments that currently cause our infrastructure to decay so rapidly. This Roman concrete offers a blueprint for a sustainable construction revolution, one where durability replaces disposability. It is a profound lesson from the past, a testament to building in harmony with natural forces rather than simply resisting them. The harbor at Caesarea stands as a quiet, monumental question, challenging our assumptions of progress. Sometimes, the most advanced path forward is found by looking back, not at a lost invention, but at a forgotten foundation that has been patiently waiting for us to understand its strength. From the silent strength of Roman concrete to a sound that has echoed through concert halls for centuries, we find a mystery not of survival, but of sublime beauty. A Stradivarius violin is more than an instrument, it is a voice from another age. When played by a master, it produces a tone described as luminous, complex, and impossibly rich, a sound that seems to carry the very soul of the music. Crafted in the small Italian town of Cremona over 300 years ago, these instruments are the undisputed pinnacle of the violin maker's art. Their sound has defined musical excellence for generations, and their secret has become the holy grail of acoustic science. What alchemy of wood, varnish, and geometry could create something so perfect that modern technology cannot reliably replicate it? The quest for the Stradivarius secret is a detective story that examines everything from global climate patterns to microscopic chemistry. Worked during a period known as the Little Ice Age, when colder temperatures across Europe caused trees to grow more slowly. The alpine spruce and maple he used would have had an exceptionally tight, uniform grain, a natural material property that luthiers believe contributes to a more resonant, balanced sound. But the wood alone is not the answer. His genius lay in his holistic approach. His arching design, the subtle curvature of the violin's top and back plates, was a masterpiece of pre-industrial engineering, carved to precise, intuitive thicknesses that allow the entire instrument to vibrate as one. Then there is the varnish. For centuries, this final coating was thought to be the magical ingredient, a lost recipe containing rare gums, oils, or even crushed gemstones. Modern chemical analysis has demystified it somewhat, showing it to be a sophisticated but not supernatural blend of oil and resin. Yet its application, its interaction with the aged wood beneath, may still hold a key. Some researchers propose that the wood itself was chemically treated with minerals like borax or alum for preservation, which could have fundamentally altered its cellular structure over centuries of vibration. Others use computed tomography scans to map the exact dimensions of surviving instruments, creating digital blueprints of their legendary geometry. Contemporary makers can now copy these measurements with incredible accuracy, and they can source wood from the same forests, aged for decades. They can apply varnishes based on historical recipes. And the violins they produce are often magnificent, award-winning instruments. Yet in blind listening tests with world-class musicians, a new violin, no matter how expertly made, does not consistently eclipse or even match the sound of an original Stradivarius. There is a consensus that we are missing a final, subtle variable, or more likely, a perfect synergy of all the variables. It may be the 3 centuries of continuous playing that have cured the wood further, a process we cannot accelerate. It may be an intangible element of its own hand, a lifetime of accumulated tactile knowledge that no scan can capture. The Stradivarius remains a ghost in the workshop, a reminder that some forms of genius are so deeply embedded in their time and place, in the feel of a tool and the intuition of an artist, that they resist being fully translated into data. We can analyze its echo, but we cannot yet reconstruct the original voice. The elusive artistry of the Stradivarius speaks to a mastery of material on a grand, resonant scale. Yet another ancient artifact demonstrates a command over matter at a level so small it borders on the invisible. In the quiet halls of the British Museum rests a Roman drinking cup from the 4th century that performs a seemingly impossible trick. Under ordinary light, it appears a murky jade green. But hold it up to a source of light, let illumination pass through its glass, and the entire vessel transforms into a luminous, deep ruby red. This is the Lycurgus cup, and its secret was not in its form but in its very substance. The cup is a breathtaking example of glasswork, a cage cup where an outer lattice of figures depicting the myth of King Lycurgus is carved from a single, thick block of glass. But its true marvel is chemical. For centuries, the source of its color shift was a beautiful mystery. Modern science finally provided the answer, and it is astonishing. Embedded within the glass are particles of gold and silver, but not in any form a Roman artisan could have seen. These particles are nanoparticles, measuring roughly 50 nanometers across, smaller than a wavelength of light. This was an accidental, yet brilliant, mastery of nanotechnology some 1,600 years before the term was even conceived. The effect is called dichroism. The tiny metal particles interact with light in a specific way. In reflected light, the glass scatters and absorbs certain wavelengths, giving the green hue. In transmitted light, however, the particles allow red wavelengths to pass through, creating that stunning crimson glow. The likely method was as ingenious as it was imprecise. Artisans would have added a small amount of finely ground metal dust, perhaps from a coin or flake, into the molten glass batch. The intense heat and the chemistry of the melt would then break down the metals into those microscopic nanoparticles. The result was not a predictable science, but an empirical art. They knew that adding a certain pinch of that dust under certain conditions created this magical effect, but the precise control over particle size and distribution was a fragile craft. Passed down through practice and lost with the decline of the Roman glassmaking tradition. Today, researchers look upon the Lycurgus cup not just as a museum piece, but as a historical precursor to modern photonic crystals, materials engineered to control light. Scientists are studying it to unravel the secrets of ancient colloidal chemistry, the behavior of particles suspended in a medium. We can now create similar dichroic glass in laboratories with precise instruments, but we are still trying to reverse engineer the exact. Repeatable process, the Romans used with their rudimentary tools and observational genius. The cup is a silent testament to a different kind of knowledge, one where art and science were not separate disciplines, but intertwined in the heat of the furnace. It represents a recipe not just for colored glass, but for wonder, a formula that we can analyze but whose original creative spark remains just out of reach. The silent alchemy of the Lycurgus cup gave glass a magical property of light, but an even more startling legend suggests a Roman artisan once gave glass a property it should not possess at all: strength. In the 1st century, during the reign of Emperor Tiberius, a humble glassmaker is said to have achieved the impossible. He presented the emperor with a singular drinking bowl, then demonstrated its wonder by throwing it forcefully to the marble floor. Instead of exploding into 1,000 glittering shards, as any normal vessel would, the bowl merely dented. With a few taps of a small hammer, the artisan popped the dent out and restored the bowl to its perfect form. He called his creation flexible glass. This story, preserved by the historians and Pliny the Elder, reads like an ancient footnote of wonder and profound loss. The inventor, seeking reward, reportedly claimed his formula could be taken away entirely. But Tiberius, gripped by a sudden fear, asked a devastating question: what would this do to the value of gold and silver? If a common artisan could produce an unbreakable, beautiful material, would it not undermine the entire foundation of imperial wealth, built upon precious metals? In a chilling act of economic preservation, the emperor ordered the glassmaker executed and his workshop destroyed. The secret of flexible glass, if it ever truly existed, was extinguished. This tale transcends a simple mystery of materials. It becomes a parable about the fragility of progress itself. It shows how a single decision, driven by fear of disruption, can erase a potential technological path from history. So what might this flexile have actually been? Modern materials science offers several tantalizing possibilities, each pointing to a potential leap in ancient understanding. It could have been an early, accidental form of tempered glass, created through a specific, rapid quenching process that puts the surface into compression, making it far more resistant to impact. Or perhaps the artisan discovered a natural polymer or resin additive that, when mixed with molten glass, created a composite material with plastic-like qualities, bending under stress instead of fracturing. We see echoes of this concept today not only in tempered glass, but in products like Gorilla Glass on our phones or in certain transparent polymers. The ancient account describes a material that dented, a behavior more akin to metal or plastic than to classic brittle glass. This detail is crucial. It suggests a fundamental alteration of the material's internal structure. The tragedy is that we are left with only a story, a historical anecdote without a physical artifact to analyze. No sample of Roman flexible glass has ever been found. This leaves us in a realm of haunting speculation. Did a lone innovator truly stumble upon a formula that would not be rediscovered for nearly two? The legend of flexile forces us to consider a different kind of loss, not from the slow erosion of time or the depletion of a mine, but from the deliberate snuffing out of an idea. It asks us to ponder the invisible cost of what might have been. How many other simple, durable, and revolutionary materials never made it out of the workshop because they threatened the established order? The ghost of that unbreakable bowl is a reminder that history is not just shaped by the inventions that survived, but perhaps even more powerfully by those that were never allowed to live. The legend of flexible glass warns of progress deliberately erased. Yet another story from the ancient world speaks of a genius so formidable, his very mind became a weapon to defend his city. During the Roman siege of in the 3rd century before the Common Era, the brilliant inventor Archimedes was called upon to turn the tide. Historical accounts describe fantastic war machines of his design, giant cranes that could lift ships from the water and dash them against the rocks. But one tale stands out for its sheer audacity, the story of the heat ray. As the story goes, Archimedes instructed soldiers to line the city walls, each holding a highly polished bronze shield. On his command, they angled these shields to reflect and concentrate the intense Mediterranean sunlight onto the wooden hulls of the approaching Roman fleet. A single point of focused light became a beam of searing heat, and one by one, the ships allegedly burst into flame. It is a dramatic image, a death ray born from the sun itself, wielded by the greatest mathematician of his age. For centuries, this account has been relegated to the realm of myth, a colorful exaggeration of Archimedes' legendary cleverness. The practical hurdles seem immense. Could bronze, even perfectly polished, achieve a mirror finish sufficient to focus light? Could a line of soldiers, without modern aiming devices, coordinate their reflections onto a single, small point on a moving ship hundreds of feet away? And could the resulting heat ignite seasoned, possibly wet, ship timbers before the target moved out of range? Historians rightly debate its plausibility, noting that the primary sources writing centuries later treated it as a curious rumor. Yet the story persists because it represents something more than a historical fact check. It embodies a lost concept, a blueprint for harnessing a fundamental force of nature, solar energy, for large-scale application. The loss is not necessarily a physical array of shields, but the specific engineering insight Archimedes might have possessed about optics, focal lengths, and thermal conduction. Did he understand the parabolic shape needed to concentrate energy? Could he have devised a simple sighting mechanism to align the mirrors? This is the ghost in the legend, the potential applied knowledge that was never formally recorded. Modern attempts to test the idea have yielded fascinating, if mixed, results. In 2007, a team from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology conducted a famous experiment. Using 127 mirrored tiles, they managed to focus sunlight on a stationary wooden mock-up of a ship's hull. They did produce a char and, under ideal, windless conditions with the target perfectly still, even a small flame. A later attempt by the television show Mythbusters, however, failed to achieve ignition under more realistic, dynamic conditions. The conclusion from these tests is not a simple yes or no. They show the concept is theoretically possible, but its battlefield practicality hinges on a perfect, and perhaps unlikely, convergence of conditions, materials, and discipline. This ambiguity is precisely why the story endures. It blurs the line between legend and a spark of genuine innovation. It forces us to ask not just could it have happened, but what level of understanding did Archimedes truly command? The tale of the heat ray, whether fact or inspiring fiction, continues to fuel imagination. It directly inspires modern research into concentrated solar power, where vast arrays of mirrors focus sunlight to drive turbines or create immense heat for industrial processes. In a way, we have built the grand, technological descendant of Archimedes' supposed shield array. So the legend's true legacy may not be a lost weapon, but a perennial idea. A challenge from the past that pushes us to explore the limits of historical innovation and our own relationship with the boundless energy of the sun. The sun's power, harnessed by legend, gave way to a new kind of energy at the dawn of the 20th century, one that flowed through wires and promised to reshape human experience itself. In the bustling heart of New York City, around 1906, a different kind of concert hall existed, one without a stage or visible performers. Subscribers in upscale restaurants and private homes would lift a telephone receiver, and through it would pour not a voice, but rich, orchestral music generated miles away by a monstrous machine called the Telharmonium. This 200-ton instrument, invented by, was a palace of spinning steel and electricity. It was not merely an early electronic instrument. It was the first conceptual leap toward the world of streaming media we inhabit today. Imagine the wonder of that moment, hearing complex, continuous music delivered like a utility, as if turning on a faucet for sound. The Telharmonium worked on a breathtakingly physical scale. Its core was a roomful of massive rotary dynamos and tone wheels, each precision engineered to produce a specific musical frequency as it spun within a magnetic field. By combining these tones through a complex switchboard console, an operator could synthesize the sounds of flutes, cellos, or entirely new timbres, all without a single vibrating string or column of air. It was, in essence, a mechanical computer for music, a precursor to the modern synthesizer built not with microchips, but with locomotive-sized components. Yet its grandeur was its downfall. The machine consumed staggering amounts of electrical power, its dynamos frequently overheated, and its massive electromagnetic fields leaked into the city's telephone network, causing disruptive buzzing on nearby lines. The cost to build and operate it was astronomical, and its sheer physical immobility made it a prisoner of its own power plant. After a few years of fascinated headlines and financial struggle, the Telharmonium fell silent. The machines were dismantled for scrap during the First World War, and no complete example survives. We are left with patents, technical diagrams, and written accounts that describe its operation, but we have no recording of its actual sound. This loss is profound in a uniquely modern way. We have lost not just a device, but an entire auditory environment, the specific texture and quality of the first electrically broadcast music. To recreate it today would be an act of archaeological engineering, requiring the custom forging of enormous tone wheels and the rebuilding of dedicated power systems. A task undertaken only by the most dedicated historians of technology for the sake of hearing a ghost. The Telharmonium's story is a poignant lesson in technological timing. It was a brilliant vision, a system for distributing art through infrastructure that arrived decades before the widespread adoption of radio, before the miniaturization of electronics, and before a society was ready to accept music as an intangible signal. It reminds us that pioneering an idea is sometimes not enough. The world must be ready to receive it. Built a future that had to wait for a smaller, more practical container, leaving his magnificent, humming Leviathan as a silent monument to a road not taken. While the Telharmonium was silenced by its own physical scale, another 20th century invention was suppressed by the weight of scientific consensus. The story of Reich and his is not one of a lost machine in the traditional sense, but of a lost world of thought. In the 1950s, this Austrian-born psychiatrist turned radical scientist began constructing strange, skeletal devices from arrays of hollow metal pipes. These contraptions, which he called, were not connected to any conventional power source. Instead, they were grounded in flowing water or buried in the earth. Reich claimed they could manipulate the weather by drawing in and redirecting a universal energy he called orgone, a hypothetical life force he believed permeated all of nature. To observers, the process was both mundane and mystical. Reich would aim the pipes at the sky, and according to numerous anecdotal reports from his experiments in the desert of Arizona, clouds would begin to form or dissipate in the targeted area. He believed he was not just breaking up storms, but balancing a cosmic energy that influenced everything from human health to the atmosphere itself. This was not merely an attempt at weather control. It was the physical expression of an entire alternative scientific paradigm, one that stood in stark opposition to the established physics of its day. Mainstream science dismissed orgone energy as pseudoscience, a fantasy with no basis in measurable, repeatable experiment. The controversy reached its peak when the United States Food and Drug Administration obtained an injunction against Reich, leading to the burning of his books and journals and his eventual imprisonment. The suppression was legal and institutional, aimed at what was deemed medical fraud, but the effect was the effective erasure of his entire framework of research from legitimate academic discourse. So what is lost here? We have not lost a reliable weather machine, for Reich's claims were never under controlled conditions. What vanished was the complete experimental method, the detailed observations, and the peculiar apparatus of a man who operated entirely outside the box. The itself is a ghost of a different kind, a physical artifact of a discredited belief system. Modern attempts to recreate or experiment with exist almost entirely on the fringes of science, often tied to speculative or paranormal research. Some experimenters report anomalous effects, while skeptics attribute any perceived results to coincidence or psychological suggestion. The device serves as a powerful case study in how ideas that challenge the fundamental assumptions of an era can be completely excised from the record, not by time or forgotten recipes, but by the gatekeepers of knowledge themselves. It leaves us with haunting questions not about the atmosphere, but about the nature of belief and evidence. How do we distinguish between a brilliant crackpot and a visionary ahead of his time? When does skepticism protect scientific integrity, and when might it inadvertently extinguish a spark of unconventional truth? The rusting in the realm of forgotten ideas stands as a monument to paths of inquiry that were permanently closed, a reminder that the history of science is not just a story of steady accumulation, but also of roads not taken and paradigms left unexplored. The suppression of unconventional ideas like the highlights how easily a thread of knowledge can be severed. But long before institutional gatekeepers, the greatest threat to preserving a technique was often the simple, silent passage of time and the reliance on spoken word. This brings us to a tool that guided an entire age of exploration across some of the most treacherous waters on Earth, the Viking Sunstone. Picture a wooden longship, its dragon head prow cutting through the heaving swells of the North Atlantic. The sky is a solid blanket of cloud, the sun invisible, the horizon a featureless line. In this disorienting void, with no stars to steer by, how did Norse navigators plot a course from Norway to Greenland, or even to the shores of North America? Medieval Icelandic sagas hint at the answer, mentioning a sunstone. This was not a mythical object, but a practical tool, a crystal that could reveal the sun's hidden position. Modern researchers, piecing together physics and archaeology, believe this sunstone was likely a specific mineral, Icelandic spar. This is a transparent form of calcite that possesses a remarkable optical property called birefringence, or double refraction. When you look through a clear piece of this crystal, you see two overlapping images. But its true navigational genius lies in how it interacts with polarized light. Sunlight becomes polarized as it scatters through the atmosphere, creating a pattern in the sky that our eyes cannot see, but that this crystal can detect. Even on a completely overcast day, this pattern persists, radiating from the direction of the hidden sun. The theory is that a Viking navigator would hold the stone up to the sky and slowly rotate it. At a certain orientation, the crystal would appear to brighten or darken in a specific way, revealing a subtle band of contrast that pointed toward the sun's azimuth. By taking a couple of these readings at different times, they could triangulate their position with astonishing accuracy. We know the principle works. Laboratory experiments and modern sailing trials with replicas have confirmed it. The lost knowledge is not the what, but the precise how. No sunstone has ever been definitively found in an archaeological context that confirms its use as a navigational aid. We have crystals and we have sagas, but we lack the living master to demonstrate the exact grip, the specific rotation, the practiced eye needed to interpret the subtle shift in light. Was the stone held flat or on its edge? Did navigators use a carved wooden frame to steady it? Was there a specific chant or mnemonic passed from father to son that helped interpret the crystal's message? This is knowledge that lived in the hands and the eyes, transmitted through generations of oral tradition and apprenticeship. When that unbroken chain was finally broken, perhaps by the adoption of the magnetic compass or the upheaval of changing societies, the nuanced technique vanished, leaving only the legend and the crystal behind. The Viking Sunstone represents a pinnacle of empirical science, a brilliant workaround that used a quirk of physics to conquer a brutal environment. It showcases how ancient peoples were not just guessing. They were deeply observant natural philosophers, developing sophisticated tools that leveraged hidden phenomena in the world around them. Its ghost is not in a missing machine, but in a missing gesture, a turn of the wrist and a squint of the eye that once turned a piece of rock into a window to the sun. The Viking Sunstone offered a physical key to navigate the external world, but another ancient legend speaks of a potion meant to navigate the far more treacherous seas of the human heart. In the Odyssey, Homer describes a substance of profound solace. When Helen of Troy wishes to ease the sorrow of her guests, she adds a single, mysterious ingredient to their wine, a drug called. Its effect is immediate and total, a gentle erasure of grief. As Homer writes, whoever drank it would not shed a tear all day, not even if their own mother or father passed, not even if they witnessed a brother or a son falling before them. This was more than a simple sedative. It was described as a complete antidote to emotional pain. Represents a ghost from the very dawn of Western literature, a lost invention that targets not the body, but the memory and the soul. Historians and ethnobotanists believe this poetic reference was likely grounded in a real, potent herbal concoction known to ancient healers and shamans. The quest to identify it is a journey through the blurred lines between myth, medicine, and the deep human desire to cure despair. What plants could have been combined to produce such a targeted psychological effect? Scholars have proposed candidates based on regional flora and known ancient practices. Opium, derived from the poppy, was well known in the eastern Mediterranean for its powerful pain-relieving and euphoric properties. Henbane, a plant containing alkaloids, could induce states of forgetfulness and delirium. Other possibilities include blue lotus, known for its mild psychoactive effects, or even early forms of fermented alcohol enhanced with other botanicals. The true formula was likely a carefully guarded secret, a precise recipe passed down through initiatory traditions, its exact ratios and preparation methods lost when those traditions faded or were suppressed. The loss here is multidimensional. We are missing not just a list of ingredients, but the cultural understanding of how to use them. This potion was not for recreation. It was a ceremonial tool for managing profound trauma, a temporary respite from unbearable sorrow. Ancient healers may have understood the synergistic effects of combining plants in ways that modern pharmacology, focused on isolating single compounds, is only beginning to rediscover. Their knowledge was holistic, considering the mind and spirit as part of the treatment. Today, researchers in ethnobotany scour ancient texts and study surviving folk practices, trying to reverse engineer these ancient psychoactive blends. They can create mixtures that are sedative or mildly psychedelic, but none reliably produce the specific, literary effect of that gentle yet total dissolution of grief without loss of consciousness or reason. The original experiential quality, as narrated by Homer, remains elusive. This pursuit connects directly to our modern world. The search for is, in essence, the age-old quest to heal psychological suffering, a pursuit that continues in the development of antidepressants, therapies, and mindfulness practices. It reminds us that the challenge of emotional pain is a timeless human condition, and our ancestors sought their own tools to address it. The ghost of this is not merely a missing plant, but a missing piece of our psychological history, a testament to the ancient recognition that the mind, too, can be wounded and might, with the right key, be soothed. It frames a fundamental question that still resonates. Is there a boundary between healing the emotions and altering them? And where does that line exist in our endless search for peace? The search for a potion to soothe the soul reveals humanity's deep desire to understand and control unseen forces. But another ancient inventor sought to measure a force of a far more violent and physical kind, the shudder of the earth itself. In the year 132, during China's Han Dynasty, the brilliant court astronomer and mathematician presented the emperor with a device of both stunning artistry and profound science. It was a large, ornate bronze urn, nearly 2 meters tall. Encircling its upper portion were 8 dragon heads, each holding a bronze ball in its jaws. Below each dragon sat a corresponding bronze toad with its mouth open, poised to receive. This was not a ceremonial object. It was the world's first, designed to detect earthquakes from hundreds of miles away. The account of its first successful reading is legendary. One day, a dragon on the vessel's west side suddenly dropped its ball with a loud clang into the mouth of the toad below. Yet in the capital city, no tremor was felt. Officials skeptical of the machine's accuracy dismissed it as a malfunction. Several days later, a messenger arrived from a western province, reporting a major earthquake had struck there on the very day the dragon released its ball. The direction indicated by the machine matched perfectly. The court was astonished. The device had not just detected the quake, it had sensed its direction from an immense distance, a feat that seemed almost magical. The principle was one of elegant mechanical intuition. Historical texts describe a heavy central pendulum suspended inside the sealed urn. When seismic waves from a distant earthquake reached the capital, they would cause the ground to tremble subtly. This motion would set the internal pendulum swinging. The genius of the design was in the linkage. The pendulum was apparently connected to a set of delicate levers or mechanisms that channeled its swing in one predominant direction. This action would trip a latch, releasing only the dragon head oriented toward the earthquake's epicenter. The ball would fall, both announcing the event and pointing the way. The loss we face today is not the concept, but the exact mechanical blueprint. The surviving historical records describe what the device did, but not the precise engineering of its interior. They speak of ingenious mechanisms, but provide no diagrams or technical specifications. This leaves a magnificent ghost of early instrumentation, its outer form perfectly known, its inner soul a mystery. Modern engineers and historians have proposed numerous theories for its internal workings. The most accepted hypothesis involves an inverted pendulum, a weighted rod balanced upright. A slight tremor would cause it to topple in the direction of the seismic source, triggering the corresponding dragon. Others suggest a system of hanging weights or even a primitive inertial sensor. Several full-scale reconstructions have been built based on these ideas, and they do work, successfully detecting simulated quakes and indicating direction. But here lies the haunting question: which, if any, is truly design? Without an original model to examine or a detailed manuscript, we cannot verify which reconstruction captures the Han dynasty inventor's specific insight. The loss is compounded by the craftsmanship itself. The precision required to cast the bronze components, to balance the internal mechanism so it was sensitive but not overly fragile, to create latches that released under minute force. This represents a high watermark of metallurgical and mechanical skill from 2,000 years ago. To authentically recreate it would mean not just solving a mechanical puzzle, but reviving a strand of hands-on artisan knowledge. Stands as a powerful counterpoint to the idea that advanced scientific instrumentation began in the modern West. It was a tool born from careful observation and brilliant mechanical reasoning, a device that translated the invisible waves of a distant catastrophe into a simple, audible, and visual signal. Its disappearance as a complete, understood technology reminds us that sophisticated engineering is not a permanent possession. It is a flame that must be continually tended, passed from mind to mind and from hand to hand, or it can flicker and vanish, leaving behind only the beautiful, silent shell of its former genius. Translated distant tremors into a simple signal, but the greatest ancient engineers faced a far more constant and immense force, gravity itself. Deep in the sun-scorched alabaster quarries of in Egypt, archaeologists uncovered clues not to a device, but to a ghost of a process. Carved into the very rock walls are the traces of a massive ramp system, complete with central staircases and post holes. This was the highway for some of history's most ambitious projects, the path by which ton stone blocks began their journey to become parts of pyramids and obelisks. The ramps are understood, but a more elusive secret lingers in the sand. How did teams of workers overcome crippling friction to haul such impossible weights? Some researchers propose a technique so clever it borders on alchemy, a temporary treatment that altered the very nature of the stone's surface. Imagine a team preparing a colossal block, perhaps by painting its path or the sled runners with a specially prepared slurry. This was not magic, but possibly applied chemistry. One compelling theory suggests a mixture of water and a locally available mineral like gypsum, which can form a slick, temporary paste that dramatically reduces friction. Another, more speculative idea points to the use of certain plant-based saps or even diluted vinegar reacting with the limestone to create a fleeting, smoother surface. The effect would be transformative, turning a back-breaking, sand-grinding drag into a manageable, sliding pool. This represents a lost invention not of an object, but of a method, a perfected recipe for movement. It was the ancient world's equivalent of an industrial lubricant, born from intimate knowledge of local materials and physics. Modern experiments have tested these ideas with fascinating results. Teams have successfully moved replica blocks on wooden sleds across damp sand, which creates a firm surface. Adding a slick layer of water or clay in front of the sled reduces the pulling force required by nearly half. Yet the exact ancient formula, the precise mixture and application that allowed for the consistent, large-scale operation implied by the monuments, remains speculative. It was likely a craft knowledge passed from foreman to foreman, a trade secret of the mega construction guilds that never needed to be written down until that chain of mastery was broken. The true scale of this logistical genius is staggering. An obelisk could weigh over 400 tons, The granite blocks in a pyramid's burial chamber might be 80 tons each. To move them miles from quarry to site without the wheel in common use or complex pulley systems speaks to a mastery of practical physics that we can only partially reconstruct. The lost art of the quarries underscores a profound truth: the greatest inventions are sometimes invisible. They are not the towering stone, but the whisper of a technique that made raising it conceivable. They are the optimized processes, the collective human rhythms of work and ingenuity that enabled civilizations' most iconic signatures to be etched against the sky. We see the monumental result, but the subtle, gritty intelligence of the how has largely faded, leaving us to piece together the method from the faintest of impressions in the earth. Buried beneath the stones of a Minoan palace lies a different kind of mystery, one not of engineering or chemistry, but of pure information. Within the ruins on the island of Crete, archaeologists uncovered a small, fired clay disc, roughly the size of a modern dinner plate. Its face is not smooth, but stamped with a spiraling sequence of 241 symbols, a silent message coiled in upon itself. This is the disc, and it is an anomaly that defies every expectation. Created in the second millennium before the Common Era, it is not handwritten, but printed, each symbol pressed into the clay with a separate, pre-made seal. This makes it the earliest known example of movable type printing in human history, a technology that would not reappear in Europe for another 3,000 years. Yet the greater loss is not the method of its making, but the meaning it carries. The script on the disc is utterly unique. Its 45 distinct symbols show of human figures, animals, tools, and abstract shapes, arranged in clear groups that suggest words or phrases. But they correspond to no other known writing system from the ancient Aegean, not linear A, not linear B. It is a language island, a complete information system with no key. Imagine holding this object, feeling the texture of its impressed symbols under your thumb. You can see the careful organization, the deliberate intent. It was clearly meant to communicate something of importance, something worthy of this innovative, portable form of printing. But what? The possibilities haunt researchers. Was it a religious hymn to be carried by a priest, a set of administrative laws for a traveling official, a narrative poem, or even the rules for a forgotten board game? Each theory opens a different window into the lost Minoan civilization, a culture we know primarily through its magnificent architecture and art, but whose voices remain largely silent. The disc represents a dual disappearance, the loss of both the language and the specific purpose of this early experiment in mass communication. Attempts at recreation today are not of the physical object, which is simple enough to replicate, but of its content. Linguists and computer scientists employ powerful algorithms to search for patterns, to run statistical analyses on the symbol sequences, comparing them to every known ancient language family in the hope of finding a statistical cousin. They look for repeating prefixes or suffixes that might indicate grammar, or for symbol groupings that could correspond to numbers or names. But without a bilingual text, a stone that pairs this mysterious script with a known language, every decipherment remains a highly educated guess. Some see links to ancient Anatolian languages, others to early Greek dialects, but no consensus has emerged. The ghost here is not a machine or a material, but a complete thought, a frozen moment of Minoan intellect. It stands as a profound reminder of the fragile nature of knowledge itself. Writing was humanity's great invention to defeat time, to carry ideas across generations. Yet the disc demonstrates that writing can also become the ultimate barrier, a locked door for which the key has been melted down and forgotten. We can admire its craftsmanship and marvel at its technological prescience. But the conversation it was meant to spark ended over 3,000 years ago, leaving only the elegant, spiraling silence of its unanswered code. The silent code of the disk represents a loss of language. Yet our final story is one of a loss of touch, of the specific, irreplaceable feel of building something monumental. It catapults us from the ancient world to the very edge of living memory, to the thunderous dawn of the space age. The colossal Saturn V rocket, the machine that carried humans to the moon, was not just a vehicle, it was a symphony of thousands of components, each pushed to the limit. And its beating heart was a cluster of 5 F1 engines on its first stage. These were not merely engines, they were controlled explosions of almost unimaginable scale. Each one stood over 19 feet tall, weighed nearly 9 tons, and generated 1.5 million pounds of thrust. To achieve this, they burned a torrent of refined kerosene and liquid oxygen in a combustion chamber so violent that engineers nicknamed the phenomenon controlled chaos. The engineering to contain that chaos, to make it reliable enough to bet human lives upon, was a triumph of its era. We have the blueprints, the schematics fill archives. But the true knowledge, the living, breathing understanding of how to build them again, has faded. This is a ghost from the 20th century. When the Apollo program ended, the industrial ecosystem that created the F1 engines began to dissolve. The specialized factories retooled, the unique supply chains for specific alloys and components were redirected, and most importantly, the generation of engineers and technicians who held the tacit knowledge retired. This knowledge was not in the drawings, it was in their hands and their instincts. It was the precise welding technique passed from a master to an apprentice, the exact vibration signature that meant a turbine was balanced, the undocumented trick for machining a particular valve seat to perfection. The collective memory of 10,000 small decisions made on the factory floor. This is what evaporated. In the 2000s, recognizing this loss, NASA engineers embarked on a remarkable archaeological project, but their dig site was a warehouse. They located old, unused F1 engines and subjected them to the most advanced three-dimensional scanning technology available, creating digital maps of every internal passage and cooling channel. They discovered design nuances that had never been fully documented, subtle geometries that managed the insane heat and pressure. The goal was not nostalgia, it was to recapture the design intelligence for future heavy-lift rockets. Yet, even with these ghost images captured in lasers, a full recreation of the exact production process remains a formidable challenge. You could not simply hand the blueprints and scans to a modern factory and say, "Build this." The specific industrial arts, the muscle memory of a nation mobilized for a single, glorious purpose, are not so easily resurrected. The story of the F1 engine delivers a powerful, sobering lesson. Technological loss is not a phenomenon confined to the distant past, to fires that burned libraries or empires that fell. It can happen within decades, in an era of unparalleled documentation, when a specialized human community disbands, and its collective wisdom is not fully captured on paper or disk. It reminds us that our modern marvels are also fragile. They are built not just on ideas, but on a foundation of practiced skill and shared experience. Preserving that heritage, the hands-on knowledge behind the headlines, is as crucial as preserving the patents. The Saturn V's engines stand as a monument to what we achieved, and a quiet warning of how easily the path to those heights can become overgrown, leaving behind only the echo of thunder and the ghost in the machine. From the silent thunder of a rocket engine to the whispered code on a clay disk, Each of these 15 lost inventions tells a story of brilliance that slipped through the fingers of time. They are not simply broken tools or forgotten recipes. They are ghostly signposts pointing to entire worlds of understanding that have faded from view. What ties the burning mystery of Greek fire to the celestial mechanics of the device? It is the humbling realization that human ingenuity does not travel a single, upward slope. It spirals, it leaps, and sometimes it falls into a silence that can last for centuries. These vanished marvels force us to confront a profound truth. Our ancestors were not primitive precursors to our modern world. They were often peers in innovation, solving monumental problems with the materials and minds of their age. The quest to recreate them is about far more than nostalgia. It is a rigorous dialogue with the past, driven by the most advanced tools of the present. When scientists use particle accelerators to analyze the nanostructure of Damascus steel, or when engineers run fluid dynamic simulations to test Archimedes' legendary heat ray, they are not just solving puzzles. They are engaging in a form of experimental archaeology that pushes the boundaries of modern science itself. Each attempt to resurrect a lost formula or reverse engineer a silent machine asks new questions of our own knowledge, often revealing gaps in our understanding of chemistry, physics, and material science. These historical mysteries, therefore, are not dead ends, they are catalysts. They teach us humility by showing that sophisticated solutions can be achieved through paths we no longer tread, through intuitive craft and deep observation of the natural world. They remind us that progress is fragile, that the chain of transmission for knowledge, from master to apprentice, from one generation to the next, is the most vital invention of all, and one we must consciously protect. As we probe these enigmas with X-rays and algorithms, we do more than attempt to reconstruct objects. We reconnect with the innovative spirit that built them. We learn to see history not as a simple timeline from primitive to advanced, but as a rich, complex tapestry. Some threads are brilliantly illuminated, while others lie in shadow, waiting to be picked up again. This perspective transforms our view of the future, too. The next great leap in material science or sustainable energy might not only come from a new discovery, but from the rediscovery of an ancient principle. Waiting patiently in the fragments of a sunken harbor or the grain of a legendary blade. So we leave you with a question to ponder, one that bridges past and future. Which of these lost threads of knowledge do you believe holds the greatest potential for our world today? Is it the self-healing wisdom of Roman concrete, the uncanny navigation of the Viking Sunstone, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this journey into the forgotten corners of human creativity, subscribe for more explorations where history's greatest mysteries meet the cutting edge of modern discovery.